Hey, what's up, my scribes? It's your man, Bentley Kyle Evans, and welcome back to another episode of The Hollywood Blueprint. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about relationship building as it relates to the entertainment business. It's very important to have relationships, so I want to talk a little bit about that. Before we begin, I want you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. I post new videos every Wednesday because I want to see your Hollywood dreams come true. Okay, so today I want to talk a little bit about relationship building and relationships in the industry because relationships, in my opinion, are the most important thing that you can have in this business. Your Rolodex, as we used to call it in my day, your Rolodex is the most important asset that you can have when it comes to relationship building. You need to be able to call on different people for different things and be well connected. And I say these things because I used my relationships in order to get into the business and get myself to different levels of the business. And the first example that I'd like to use is that my relationship with none other than Martin Lawrence, Hollywood's bad boy. My relationship with Martin has afforded me a lot of different things. I mean, just with my relationship alone, I've been afforded the opportunity to travel around the world on somebody else's dime, or should I say somebody else's private jet. I've done that several times because of my relationship with Martin. But more importantly, my relationship with Martin, well, it goes back to when we first met and we were both up for the same role in a TV series called A Little Bit Strange. Martin ended up ultimately getting the role in A Little Bit Strange, but from that point on, we forged a relationship. And with that, a bond was created and we started palling around in LA and just kept our friendship moving in the right direction, going very, very strong. Well, a few years into that relationship, Martin was afforded the opportunity to star and produce in his own TV series. And because of our relationship, I was able to get some inside intel on how that process was going to happen. So, of course, because of our relationship, he did ask me the question. He says to me, hey, how can I help you? Because if this thing happens for me, and I know it will because he was very confident, he's a very confident guy. He said, I know it will happen for you, for me. And so therefore, I want to be able to put you in a position to do what you want. So maybe you may want to audition for one of the main characters on the show. And I stopped him right there and said, no, that's not what I was interested in. I already knew that this was an opportunity as soon as he started speaking about it. I knew that this was my chance to make a difference in my life, in my lifestyle, in my career. And instead of, desiring to be an actor in the show, I let him know right from the jump that my true desire was to become a writer on the show. And I'll get into, how I became a writer and why I became a writer later. But I let him know that my true desire was to be on his writing staff. And of course, there were doubts because he didn't know that I was capable of actually writing full scripts. But when I presented one to him later on, and I'll get into that story a little later as well, when I presented him with one of my scripts, that he fell in love with it instantly, and he made sure that I was able to be on his writing staff. Now, of course, there's a lot more to that story and a lot more details to come. It'll be in my book. It'll also be in other episodes of the Hollywood Blueprint. When I presented the idea to Martin that I wanted to be a writer on his staff of his TV series, whatever that show was going to be, of course it was met with a little bit of resistance because he had never seen any of my writing and I had never showed him anything. So he had no idea that I could craft a script. And so once he got a chance to review one of my scripts, he was blown away and he saw to it that I become one of the writers on the staff of The Martin Show season 1. There's a much more detailed story in that, and I'll talk about it later or in future episodes. And you let me know if you guys want to see other things and other stories that correlate to that. But in the meantime, all I can say is that it was because of a relationship that I had established a couple of years prior to this incident that I was able to utilize that relationship and start my career as a television writer for a sitcom. It was my dream. My dream came true, and it was all because of that relationship. Again, when we talk about relationships, I have too many to even mention in this episode, but I will say this. Later in my career, after the whole Martin experience, I'll just pick another one of my relationship examples that propelled me to another level of this entertainment game. I'll talk about a gentleman by the name of Jeff Franklin. I'm quite sure that some of you guys have watched the shows that he's been responsible for. So when we think of Jeff Franklin shows, let's talk about Full House. That's probably his biggest show to date. Also, they did the reboot on Netflix. Some of you guys saw it. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. But Full House was definitely one of the most important television shows in television history. And it spawned the Olsen twins and so many others from that show. Well, Jeff also created Hanging with Mr. Cooper, and I'm sure a few other shows that I don't necessarily need to mention because I think I've given you quite a great example of who Jeff Franklin is. Well, anyway, Jeff and I worked at Warner Brothers at the same time. I was doing the Jamie Foxx show at the time, and I don't know what show Jeff was on, but the thing that caught my attention about Jeff was a guy that always had a pretty girl on his arm. He always had a really pretty date with him. And I used to see him at the Laker games. And I was a big Laker fan, big Laker advocate, and so was Jeff. And so we had very little knowledge of each other, but of course he knew who I was and I knew who he was. And one day I went out on a whim and I asked Jeff, hey man, what do you think about getting back into television? Because I think Jeff had taken a time out from TV, maybe. And he says to me, well, I think I'm done with TV. I'm not really interested in that. And he made a boatload of money, so he didn't necessarily need to do it again. So when I was talking to Jeff, he says to me, well, what are you working on nowadays? And I said, well, you know what? I'm thinking about doing something different, something that we haven't really done from working at Warner Brothers. I want to do something independent. And I know that independence was not necessarily the way that we were taught to do things in this industry. We were taught to do things through the studio system. But I felt like there were too many other examples of people that were making it outside of that system, namely Tyler Perry and a few others. A few other names come to mind. But I thought that if I could create my own content, then I would be able to create a way to be in control of my own destiny by creating my own content for a more modest price and basically controlling the distribution of that product. So I was talking to Jeff about that, and I think that Jeff thought that I was crazy because it sounded so foreign to him, but he did at least entertain me and invite me to his house for lunch. And so I go up to Jeff's house, and now I got to tell you, this was quite an adventure. It's up on Cielo Drive in Beverly Hills. Now, I have to mention it because the house was the former house of Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski. It's where the heinous murders took place, unfortunately. But they built another house in the place of it. But Jeff bought the house. I'm sure he got the land really cheap. Anyway, I digress. I'm back to the story. I go there to meet Jeff, and we have his private chef make us lunch. And I was like, oh, private chef. Okay, great. Yeah, this is fantastic. I felt like I was in a movie going up to pitch him a movie, or a TV show, I should say. So we have lunch, and I pitched to him what I was trying to do. I wanted to do 10 episodes of a show that I had dreamed up, and I had written 10 episodes, and we'll talk about that later or in another episode. But I had written 10 episodes of a show that was entitled Love That Girl. I just felt like if I take my time and sit down by myself, I can create a whole series. And I took about 2 months to do this. I wrote 10 episodes of Love That Girl because I wanted to prove to myself, number one, that I could do it, but I also wanted to have a burden of proof that I have these episodes that are already written and crafted correctly. So when I talked to Jeff about it, he was very quiet and he listened to me that day and he told me that he needed a little bit of time to think about it. So we enjoyed our meal and I went about my merry way. I got a call from Jeff a couple of days later, and what he said to me was, it was cool. It was a consolation. He says, look, I don't believe that you can do 10 episodes for, I think I was asking him for about $400,000. He says, I don't believe that you could do 10 episodes for 400,000. But I tell you what, if you scale that back and you tell me that you'll do 4 episodes, I will gladly contribute $200,000 towards your effort. Well, again, that was a constellation prize. It wasn't what I went there for, but it was definitely a positive. So I made the agreement with him to do those 4 episodes, and we did those, and we did them correctly. And we were able to take those 4 episodes into 65 episodes, and that's what spawned my independent career as an independent television producer or content creator, as they say today. I say all that just to say that Jeff Franklin and I forged a relationship just by hanging out at Laker games and knowing that we had something in common, and that was that we were both television writer producers. And that relationship has created all sorts of opportunities for me. It opened all sorts of doors. It created a whole bunch of haters. It created so much that it'll make your head spin, but it's all based upon relationships. And I thank Jeff to this very day for allowing me the opportunity to have him invest in my product. And I came out with a great series. And for that reason, I've moved to the next level of the game, and that is independence in the Hollywood industry. Another relationship that I had in the business was with a gentleman by the name of Nick Cannon. And I think you guys all know who Nick Cannon is by now from his Wild 'N Out series and so many other shows, the Masked Singer, and so many other shows that he's been a part of as talent. Nick has made a wonderful name for himself in the industry, and I couldn't be more proud of him. I've known him since he was about 17 years old. And the one thing that I loved about Nick was his confidence level. He always had great confidence. And although the show that I was in the process of creating with Nick back in 1998, I believe, it never came to fruition, but we did forge a wonderful relationship just by the experience of going through it. And so later on, maybe another 2 years later, Nick Cannon comes to my house and I'm there and my nephew Niall Evans is there. And we're just kind of sitting around spitballing. I introduced Nick to Niall and they hit it off right off the bat. They had chemistry. He tells me that he wants to do this show and he's calling it Wild 'N Out. Well, I had never even heard the term Wild 'N Out, but it's a very popular term now, of course, but I had never heard that term used before, Wild 'N Out. Nick pitches me this show and I said, what is it? He says, it's a sketch type of reality type of, I don't know what it was. And I didn't understand it. And so I told Nick, I said, hey man, look, if you got an idea, just move forward with it. Just do it. I don't think that I'm the guy to get involved in it with you because I don't know what that is. I didn't understand the idea of mixing sketch with variety, with reality. I should have understood it because we did sketch with sitcom when we did DeMartin. We merged with the characters that he played. We merged sketch with sitcom. So I should have had a better understanding, but I didn't at the time. I was kind of one track in my sitcom mind, and that did not fit within what I was thinking. So I told Nick, hey man, I think that I'm going to have to pass on that opportunity. And I think that maybe you should just go ahead and do it. Well, my nephew Niall steps up and says, I see it. I believe in it. I'll rock with you. So Niall and Nick get together and they go and shoot an independent pilot of Wild 'N Out at a comedy club, the Comedy Union in Los Angeles. And they shoot this presentation. Well, they showed me the presentation, but it was too late. I had already passed on it. But they showed me the presentation, and I still didn't get it. I still didn't know what type of content this was, what the audience was for it. I just didn't understand. Audiences are always changing. The business changes constantly. We never know what's next. And this was like the evolution of what a TV show could be. So I just didn't get it. I wasn't moving with the times, but Niall got it. And so Niall and Nick took that presentation to MTV, and I'm sure there's other parts of the story that I'm leaving out. But the bottom line is they were able to get that show on the air. And I think it's been on for almost 2 decades now, 20 seasons, something crazy like that. And I missed out on a boatload of money. But I will say this. I truly believe that that was not my blessing. I believe that was the blessing from my nephew, who has made more than 6 figures off of that show. And he lives a beautiful life in a beautiful home. And it was the result of a relationship that I had that I was able to share with him. And then he was able to capitalize off of the opportunity. So again, that relationship that I spawned or was spawned from me afforded my nephew, my blood nephew, an opportunity to live out his dreams as well. So that's what I would say about relationships. And my relationship with Nick Cannon is still in great tact. I think that we don't talk as much as I would like to, but we still have that relationship, and maybe I'll call on him for something else one day. If we're talking about relationships, I cannot hit the hammer on the nail any harder than to drive the point home that relationships are super important. It ain't what you know, it's who you know. Keep that in mind. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And in this particular instance, I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. So if we go back to 2000, I believe it was 2019 or 2018, and I'm in Saint-Tropez, France. A little bit of a flex, but that's just what it is. I'm in Saint-Tropez. I'm there for Magic Johnson's 60th birthday party. And so we're having the time of our life. I mean, it was so many people there, so many wonderful relationships I made there. But one relationship I already had. And it happened to be with a guy whose room was right next door to my room. And I was waiting for my wife to get dressed, and he was in the hallway waiting for his wife to get dressed, because that's what we do. And we're standing outside, and this guy's name is Ralph Farquhar. Now, you may know Ralph for shows like Moesha. He also created the Parkers, and my sister was able to write on the Parkers with him, and that's pretty much how my relationship started with him, but I digress. We're standing out in the hallway, and I hear that Ralph has another show called The Proud Family. Now, The Proud Family had already been in existence, but this was the second incarnation of The Proud Family, which was Proud Family Bigger and Louder, or Prouder and Louder, something like that. And I had seen it in the trades, and I knew that Ralph was mounting up to do a new season of The Proud Family, the reboot. And so I immediately looked at this as an opportunity to utilize my relationship. And here's what I did. I said, Ralph, I understand that you are going up with Proud Family again for a new season of a reboot, and I wanted to know if you were looking for any writers. And of course, his rebuttal to me was, Negro, you are way too old. I ain't looking for nobody your age. I'm looking for young people. And so I said, no, it's not for me. I wanted to talk to you about a writer that I know, though. And she's young. She's probably right in your wheelhouse of what you're looking for. She's probably she's 22, and she's terrific, and she's written scripts for me. And I gotta tell you, you may want to consider her when you're thinking about this. And he says, oh yeah, where do you know her from? And I said, well, she's my kid. She lives with me. Now, I know everybody brags on their kids and what their kids are able to do. But in this particular instance, I just felt like I may as well throw this out, because it may be met with resistance, but it may also be met with open arms. And so he says, well, what does your daughter do? And I said, well, her name is Kylie, and she's writing scripts. She's written scripts for me, and I've produced them, and I think that you should meet her. He says, well, when we get back to the States, have her give me a call. I thought this was just Hollywood talk because there's a lot of lip service in Hollywood. Trust me when I tell you. But in this particular instance, I called my daughter and I told her, hey, look, when I get back from France, I need you to get some of your writing material together because I want you to submit to a gentleman by the name of Ralph Farquhar. No, I know you don't know who he is, but you should at least get your stuff together because this may be an opportunity for you. And as the story would go, we get back to America. I have her call Ralph and set up a meeting. And I take her to the meeting and she goes in and she charms Ralph. She knocks his boots off, basically, with her ability to communicate, her ability to write a script because she had shown him some of her spec scripts that she had already written and some of the scripts that I had already produced through my studio, Harvest Studios. And so Ralph offers her a job as a writer's assistant. And then the story gets a little bit convoluted because there were certain things that me and my nephew did to help move her from being considered as a writer's assistant to really being considered as a staff writer. And that's a whole long other story that we can get into at another point. But what ended up happening was Ralph offered her a position on his staff as a staff writer. And my daughter goes from being basically a freelance writer to a staff writer. And now she's a full-fledged employee at Disney as a result of Ralph bringing her on. I'm very long-winded when it comes to my kid because it's my kid and I want to see them do the best. I want to see my children do the best in life that they can possibly be. So, of course, utilizing one of my relationships, I was able to open a door for her. If I didn't have that relationship with Ralph, I don't know what she may be doing, but because I did have it, hey, it worked out in my favor and it worked out in my daughter's favor. And so I would just like to say that having great relationships in this business is the greatest asset that you can have when it comes to creating opportunities for yourself and for others. So lastly, I'd like to say that every job is just an interview for the next job. I really want to bring that point home because what I mean by that is when you get into a position to work in this business or any other business that you're in, but especially the entertainment business, you must do your best. You put your best foot forward and you make sure that whoever gave you that opportunity, you don't disappoint them because all they're going to do is bring you on to the next show or job that they're doing and so forth and so on. So you want to make sure that you do your best and really understand that when you get in and you got your foot in that door, you step on that gas and you go through it as fast as you can and you do the best that you can do because every job is an audition for the next job. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see some of these gems that I'm dropping and comment below with some of the things that you may want to see in the future on my Patreon channel.